2017 was a pretty cool year for video games. A lot of great games came out that I didn't talk about at all. I didn't make any videos, like, at all in 2017. I made, like, one, and it wasn't even that good. So I'm going to talk about my favorite games of 2017. I'm not good at intros, so I'm just going to get into it. Persona 5 is this really cool JRPG about stealing hearts and stuff. It's pretty cool. I've played Persona games before, and the only setting that I really enjoyed on the same level as Persona 5 was Persona 3 and Shin Megami Tensei 3. Persona 5's setting, coupled with its art style and aesthetics, made it a really cool game to play, especially for an RPG, because usually RPGs aren't the best at their settings. Usually it's something generic, and usually the graphics aren't anything to write home about, but Persona 5 has this really jazzy aesthetic to it that is just so great to play. Like, all of the menus are just gorgeous, and that's something I don't see in most games, is really good looking menus. I was excited for Persona 5, but I wasn't losing my mind waiting for it, but the second I got around to playing it, I had a blast. The music and the story and the gameplay was just so well polished, and it really shows what you can do if you actually try to make a really good RPG. One of my problems with the Persona games is the pacing. Persona 3 kind of just throws you right in, but Persona 4 takes forever for stuff to even begin. These games are good, but getting back into them with the beginnings are always so hard for me. Persona 3 is less of a problem, but on my first playthrough, I had trouble caring about the characters early on because they don't introduce them that well. Persona 4, on the other hand, has the inverse problem, where I spent way too long learning about the actual characters, even though the main story took so long. I might as well solve an actual murder in the meantime. Yeah, I'll just carry my Vita around while I solve this murder, and then my partner's gonna be like, yo, you have a Vita in 2017? What the hell, dude? And I'll be like, yeah, you're goddamn right I have a Vita in 2017. It's a goddamn great console. I'll fight you in a back alley. I'll make another murder happen over this piece of video game hardware. The Vita is one of the best made consoles ever, and I can prove it, okay? Okay? What was I talking about? Oh yeah. Persona 5, on the other hand, was great. It just fell right in the middle of throwing you in and building up the characters. It's not too long till you get into the meat of the gameplay, much faster than most Persona games. Like, from the get-go, you are already thrown into the first dungeon, and you get to explore it a bit and even do some combat. It's pretty cool, but on top of that, they also, at the same time, build the characters up while you're getting into the meat of the game. And the pacing overall is just really good. It still has a typical Persona issue where they'll introduce main characters of the game way later into the game, and then it's like, well, now I gotta learn you. I just learned these characters, and now I gotta learn your personalities and stuff. One of my favorite additions to Persona 5 is the talking mechanics from the mainline Shin Megami Tensei games. You can now talk with enemies to get items, money, or you can make them run away. And you can even get them as a new persona. It's pretty cool, and I really like that mechanic, and I hope they don't get rid of it, because that'd make me sad. So, I was pretty sure the survival horror genre was kinda dead at this point, but then Resident Evil 7 came out and basically rekindled my love for the genre. It's been so long since I've seen a game that made me feel like I was playing early Resident Evil games and Silent Hill games. In Resi 5 and 6, I never felt like I was fighting for my life. I felt like I was a cheap action hero doing a bunch of Michael Bay explosions. In Resident Evil 5, this was kind of a really misguided way to take the series, where it's more action-y, but then it's like got this edgy setting, and it's like it doesn't really understand what it wants to be. And then Resident Evil 6 is kind of like a parody of Resident Evil 5, or Resident Evil in general, and it kind of just makes fun of itself the whole time. But I mean, it's not survival horror. It's still just a giant Hollywood action movie. But in Resi 7, they finally brought back that thrill of classic Resident Evil. It had the atmosphere of Resi 1, the lingering enemies of Resi 3, the thrills of Resi 4, and all of this from a brand new first-person perspective. It's like a whole new world here. The enemies are intense and brutal to deal with. I died on this first encounter like way too many times than I'm comfortable admitting. It has this creeping, tense horror that I haven't seen done lately, because I guess people just don't like that. They prefer more jump scary horror. Just the idea of this really powerful creature that takes like a bajillion headshots just to kill, and that doesn't even kill them, it just stuns them. Just that idea is thrilling and terrifying because these enemies are ridiculous. Not only is killing them basically impossible, but they're also just insane. The choice of making the main enemy a psychotic family of superhumans really worked out in my opinion. I mean, how else could you get an awesome encounter such as this guy, who you fight in a garage? Pretty cool, and then you get to see him jump in a car and he tries to ram you with the car in a garage and you gotta shoot him in the face, and then you gotta like burn him to death, and then you gotta incinerate him, and then you gotta like you gotta fight him again, and then you gotta like chainsaw him to death. It's kind of ridiculous, and yeah, it's pretty cool. I wish more horror games would like do that. You know, I really liked Superstar Saga as a kid, so you can imagine my excitement when I heard Superstar Saga was getting a remake. They already had amazing art, but like as the games went on, they developed it into this gorgeous art style for the new Mario and Luigi games, where it's like kind of pixel art, but not really. It's more just like really good sprites, I guess. They also, of course, added stuff like the emergency guard and stuff, which I was never really a fan of, but hey, you can just not use it. It's really cool seeing all the locations, enemies, and more redrawn in... Hey, wait, what's this? The Geno cameo is gone? What? No, wait. No, actually, this is the worst game. 0 out of 10. Worst remake ever made. The Steam port of Vanquish is such a massive improvement over the original game, it might as well be considered a remake. The blistering fast third-person shooter from Platinum originally came out on PlayStation 3 and 360 back in 2010. It showed that third-person shooters didn't have to be these slow, boring slogs of games where you, like, running doesn't feel like running, it just feels like walking at a normal pace. It showed that third-person shooters could be thrilling and action-packed. Vanquish is awesome, and it has that unique Platinum flair to it where you, like, jump on a guy and punch him like a bajillion times. Now, the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 versions were great games, they were still enjoyable, but with this PC port, the originals got rendered obsolete so hard they might as well not even exist. The original Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 games were kinda low res and they suffered from slowdown a lot in the busy areas of the game. And then the PC port slides in with these mind-meltingly fast, unlocked frame rate, and gorgeous-looking remastered textures and 4K support. All of that is nice, but like, the unlocked frame rate is what sells it. Unlike the Bayonetta route, where it's just on PC and looks nice, Vanquish went above and beyond, and it's got this FPS going blazing. It was so fast that it actually broke the game a few times before they patched it out. Just adding this new frame rate makes the original look like a slog to play. It's like no going back after you play Vanquish at 300 frames per second. Snipperclips is this pretty cool Nintendo Switch puzzle game that's probably the most fun I've had with a co-op puzzle game. Now, there's been a few co-op puzzle games before, and the only one I really enjoyed was Portal 2, and Portal 2 had really good puzzles and really good player interaction, and it wasn't until Snipperclips that I really saw another game get that player synergy just perfect. There's even like versus minigames that really caught me off guard by how much fun they turned out to be in a puzzle game. I thought they'd be boring and tacked on minigames, but they turned out to be this huge amount of fun. Me and my sister sunk tons of hours into this game the first time we played, and the puzzles can be pretty easy or really challenging when it wants to be. What really sells this is the art style and the little adorable faces the shape makes. There's so many faces these guys make, and it's just so adorable. It just really adds this level of charm that really makes the game a joy to play. Sonic Mania is a glorious return to form for classic Sonic games, and it's really the true Sonic 4, not the other Sonic 4. What is this? What is this? Sonic Mania is the most fun I've had with a classic Sonic game. Going back to the old games, I've always had a major problems with some, but they were fun nonetheless. Sonic Mania takes everything great about old Sonic and modernizes it. It even has additions that make the game way better, such as the drop dash. A move that doesn't require you to stop, crouch down, and spin dash just to get up one slope. All of the zones are great. You've got the dumb stuff that just kind of has the obligation to be in the game because it's Sonic, like Green Hill Zone. Then you've got the fan favorites like Stardust Speedway and Flying Battery. And then you've got some really unexpected picks that I really enjoyed, like Metallic Madness and Hydrosity. All of the zones are really great and insanely memorable. Most of the zones are great. But the real star to this game is the original zones, which are all just amazing. It really makes me yearn for a sequel to this game with all original zones. Please no more, please no more Green Hill Zone, please. Cuphead is a run-and-gun game inspired by old run-and-gun games from the 90s such as Contra and Gunstar Heroes, but with the art style of 1930s and 1940s cartoons. And seeing a game with this level of detail in the art is staggering. The art in this game is just gorgeous. It's not just the art, but the gameplay feels like reliving those old games all over again. It's a frantic and challenging run-and-gun. The format's a bit different this time though. There's a few side-scrolling levels, but that's not the meat of the game. Cuphead is primarily played in bosses. Really, really hard bosses. This whole game is a delight, and it's a challenging delight. And luckily, the game doesn't feel unfair. It's frustrating, and it'll make you lose your mind sometimes.
Yeah. Oh my god. Oh my god, the fucking jelly bean! Oh my god! I'm so tired of them, man!
But the thing is that all the bosses are so short that when you die, you don't really lose any progress. Like, the longest boss in the game is like 5 minutes long. If you die, you just immediately retry. There's not really that much of a load screen, and you don't sit through a dumb cutscene, you just fight. And it's hard, but it's really fair. And no, it's not like Dark Souls. Not every game you can't beat instantly is like Dark Souls. Jesus. Monster Hunter is Destiny, crossed with Dark Souls and dinosaurs. What? When you first fight bosses, you're gonna get destroyed. You're gonna get your face wiped on the floor, and your face is just gonna get destroyed, and then your face is gonna get, like, ripped off, and then destroyed again, and then the bosses are gonna, like, take the face that they've already destroyed, and then they're gonna, like, throw it into another dimension, and then they're gonna destroy it in that dimension. And basically what I'm gonna say is that the bosses are gonna murder you. Yeah. It's pretty cool. But every time you fight them, you get a better understanding of the boss. You start learning them, and then it clicks. And this is where the animation really shines through. See, in a game like this, you need to have bosses telegraph their attacks. And Cuphead really does telegraph their attacks. Because the animation, instead of sitting at a 24 FPS or 30 FPS, Cuphead went the extra mile to animate the entire game at 60 frames per second. And because of that high level of detail in these animations, the telegraphs are insanely obvious. That doesn't make the game easy, but the level of high detail lets you see even the slightest twitch that these bosses make, and you can usually tell when they're gonna attack. That doesn't mean that you're gonna dodge it, but you can usually tell when an attack is coming, for the most part. This makes bosses an intense game of concentration, looking out for the simplest movements to react to. Games like these would usually boil down to memorization, such as games like I Wanna Be the Guy. But Cuphead actually requires you to react to stuff. It's not just 100% memorization. Without turning it into a full Cuphead video, an example of this would be the boss Baroness von Bonbon. This boss has a unique format compared to a lot of the bosses, where you don't actually get to fight the main attraction. You first have to fight 3 of 5 randomly selected sub-bosses. So you can't just memorize the bosses and prep for them through muscle memory, and whenever a sub-boss you weren't expecting appears, you really need to adapt your strategy. It makes it a very adaptive and dynamic game. This makes Cuphead a thoroughly enjoyable experience all the way through. So, I'm actually not a big fan of point-and-click games. They always made me feel dumb, and I never really got a lot of the mechanics in these. Often, they are these convoluted, confusing, and really just often obnoxious games to play. And the point of these puzzles is that you're supposed to solve them using your brain, so it feels really crappy when I have to use a walkthrough for a point-and-click game, and you look up something only to know that I need to learn base 25 and base 5 number systems? But ignoring that, I had an amazing time with Hiveswap, which was this Homestuck-based point-and-click adventure game by Andrew Hussey and What Pumpkin. It's literally the most fun I've ever had with a point-and-click game. All the characters are just fun to watch, and the writing is really memorable. The puzzles are fun, and it even has like a pseudo-combat system, which isn't like really a combat system. It's basically just more puzzles. But they're a ton of fun. All of these puzzles felt logical, and they made sense. They didn't feel like I was doing anything that required me to watch Rick and Morty to get an IQ of 200 or something. And whenever I did the wrong solution, like combining something wrong, it almost always gave me a response on telling me why it was wrong. It didn't just say, oh, that doesn't go together. It would like say, oh, here's why this doesn't go together. It'd like make a joke out of it, and it was really entertaining, and most of the puzzles were pretty fun. The story was interesting, and I'm really happy that it's a Homestuck prequel and not a sequel, because I'm a big fan of the early parts of the comic where it just feels like a game, and I was really happy to see this game take place before everything got crazy. And not much has happened yet, but there's an alarming amount of green and red lights. So, I really like open world games, or at least I used to. There was this one game I played when I was like a kid called Morrowind. It was this open world RPG that I played on the original Xbox in about 2004, and this was one of my favorite games for a while. You had so much freedom to go and explore this vast world with tons of stuff in it. It was nothing like I had ever played. I loved open world games from that point onward. They were great. They were the best games ever made to me because nothing could ever compare to them. But this opinion of open world games has kind of dwindled over time. I played Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time on the Wii Virtual Console, and my least favorite part was just walking around in the open field. There was like nothing. You just walk for a really long time. It might have just been a loading screen in disguise. Then I played Just Cause 2, and I loved that game because you could just blow stuff up and like jump off of stuff. It was cool. But then there was the world, because the world was kind of boring. It like didn't really have anything. But I'm like, oh no, it's fine. Open world it's open world, so it's good. I didn't think that, oh yeah, it's open world, but there's nothing in it. I played Wind Waker, and I hate the sailing. It sucks. There's just a big, empty expanse of water. Great, this is why I play video games, to just wait. I would literally leave the boat moving and then go to get food while I waited, and then I would still be going by the time I got back. None of this really captured my sense of wonder and exploration. This quickly diminished my opinion of open worlds, and then I played Oblivion. Oh yeah, a sequel! This is gonna be exactly what— oh, you barely even walk around, you just teleport to places, and like, the world isn't actually that interesting. It just felt like a giant expanse of random locations. It didn't feel like a living, breathing world like Morrowind did. I'm probably biased towards Morrowind because I played it when I was a kid and it was the first open world thing I got. And then Skyrim came out and that was pretty much the same, and I still enjoyed these games. I'm not saying that these are bad games or anything, but it didn't have that sense of adventure that Morrowind gave me. Zelda was the closest I ever got, and even then a lot of it was boring and I didn't want to do it. That quickly changed when I played Minecraft for the first time, which blew my mind when I saw that it's a game that basically continued on forever. There's just this infinite amount of things to discover, and in the early days of me playing Minecraft, it was amazing. I was enthralled. But then I realized what it was about open world games that I really like. It's that sense of mystery that drives these games. The idea that there's something you haven't found yet, and the excitement of discovery, exploring an unfamiliar and sometimes dangerous land. That's the core of exploration games. Skyward Sword, the new Zelda game, comes out, and it's one of the worst games I've ever played. Let me explore, don't tell me what to do. Stop, these worlds are boring. I'm not doing an adventure, I'm doing a guided tour. This isn't an exploration, it's an attraction. And as I see more games trying to push these big open worlds, these huge sprawling worlds, it was no longer about what was in the world, it was about how big you could make it. Xenoblade Chronicles X's map was boasted to be bigger than Skyrim, Fallout 4, and The Witcher 3 combined. But none of that content was good. It was just a bunch of stuff that was boring. And then Metal Gear Solid 5 comes out, and yeah, the best parts of this game are when you're not in the open world, because there's nothing in the open world. Open world is kind of a bad thing at this point. The genre is dead. Or is it? Legend of Zelda. That's the name that came up a few times. Zelda announced this big, huge open world experience. I was interested, but I was put off. Open world is bad. The game gets shown more and more, and I got slightly more interested. This might be a fun game. It could be cool. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is an open world game that feels like an adventure. It's a huge open world, but it doesn't feel like it was just haphazardly placed. Every single piece of this world feels deliberately placed and designed. There's something in like nearly every part of the world. The world's fun to walk around in, surf around in, and ride your horse in, and you can find these shrines that are like mini dungeons. The world doesn't really tell you where to go, and it actively encourages you to go wherever and like go out of order, because there isn't an order. If there's a thing, you can probably find something cool in it. The world has these puzzles which require you to observe and analyze the environment around you, and it's really cool because it actually makes the world feel more believable and designed, because these puzzles would not exist if it was just a haphazardly made world. The environments are just breathtaking to look at, and this was the sense of freedom, adventure, and discovery that I felt back in Morrowind. It was the exact wonder that I felt back in that game. The world's intimidating, it's dangerous, it can chew you up and spit you out. The world's extremely indifferent to your presence in it, and it gives you this feeling of just being a speck in this vast world of wildlife and monsters. And it's what I've been wanting from open world games. And Zelda isn't opposed to this idea, because this idea started all the way back in the original Legend of Zelda game, The Legend of Zelda. This sprawling world which you had to explore but couldn't care less about your well-being, it's indifference that creates a true feeling of adventure and discovery, kind of like Dark Souls. And this is giving me hope. Can other open world games strive for this level of quality, or are we just gonna get the same world over and over? Only time will tell. Alright, before we move on to my favorite game of the year, there's some games that I liked but didn't get on the list, or they didn't qualify for whatever reason. So here's some honorable mentions. Final Fantasy 15. This is a pretty good game. I like this RPG, but it came out in 2016, so it doesn't count. One Shot's a pretty good RPG. That's a game I played this year, but it came out last year, so it's another one that I can't count, as it didn't come out this year. Yonoid 2, Enter the Void, is a great meme game that also just happens to be a pretty good platformer. But it wasn't my favorite thing I played this year. It was okay. Hollow Knight. I didn't play enough of this, so I can't really give much of an opinion. Gravity Rush 2. I didn't get to play this because I don't have money, and I can only buy 13 games, and I didn't buy this one. I'll play it later, maybe. Nier Automata was a pretty cool RPG that I enjoyed when I played it, but I didn't play that much of it, so I don't really have that much of an opinion on it, so it's not on the list. Sorry, Monroe. And with that out of the way, that's really all I can think of for honorable mentions that I can think of off the top of my head. Now, I'm going to talk about number one spot. For the longest time, this list got delayed because there were two games I wanted to put on number one, but I couldn't decide which deserved it more. Super Mario Odyssey and A Hat in Time. Both of these games were amazing platformers that really respected the genre and finally gave us a true 3D platformer again. But these two games are two very different games. Whereas Mario Odyssey feels like a development of the 3D platformer, Hat in Time feels like a reinvention of it. Super Mario Odyssey is basically another 3D Mario game, but like a classic 3D Mario game, none of this 3D world stuff. It really felt like the next Sunshine and Galaxy. It was great, but it didn't feel too new to me. It had great mechanics and stuff, and it felt like an evolution of the 3D platformer. But it didn't feel like anything too new was brought to the table, except maybe this possession mechanic that's kind of cool. And Mario Odyssey was kind of brought down by the fact that you have to use the motion controls. And then there's Hat in Time, which takes everything I like about old 3D platformers and then reinvents it with the charm of stuff like Undertale. It's the storyline's super fun and filled to the brim with tons of unique characters with great dialogue, something that Mario Odyssey doesn't really have. You legitimately get invested in these characters as you run around the varied and interesting worlds. The level varieties genuinely makes every world feel unique. From the more linear movie studios to the free roam nature that kind of feels more like Banjo-Kazooie if anything. Hat Kid can what you can't. Hat Kid can what Yooka-Laylee can't. What is it? Hat in Time completely wipes the floor with Yooka-Laylee, which were both Kickstarter games actually. Hat in Time raised $300,000. Yooka-Laylee raised $2 million. Sometimes expensive stuff isn't as good as the other stuff. Mario Odyssey has this intense level of exploration and free roaming that is just a logical evolution of 3D platformers. All of the worlds feel nice and diverse, but my problem with Mario Odyssey, all of the moons you collect often don't feel special. Like, really? I can just walk right here and then find a moon? Like, really? It's that easy? Whereas in Hat in Time, there's tons of stuff that makes every timepiece feel like a worthwhile collectible and not just, oh look, I've got this. Great. Both of the games have great amounts of charm, but I really like the aesthetic of A Hat in Time more than I like the aesthetic of Super Mario Odyssey. But A Hat in Time is kind of limited by a small moveset that doesn't really allow for that much experimentation. But it's still fun. It doesn't necessarily need to be more complicated than it is, but it would have been nice if there was a few new moves in there. Mario Odyssey, on the other hand, has tons of moves and tons of experimentation that you can do with this moveset. There's so much stuff that speedruns of this game are kind of ridiculous. And it leaves me at this spot where I love both of these games and I wouldn't feel right knocking one of them down to this number 2nd spot. So I'm actually going to give the number 1 spot to both Hat in Time and Super Mario Odyssey because I like these games equally and it's my list and I'm lazy and I spent too long on this. So yeah, there you go. There's my list. Another thing I want to mention is that Hat in Time just has amazing bosses in a genre that I didn't even think could have good bosses. Hat in Time has some of my favorite bosses of all time now because they're just so good in a genre that I didn't think could make good bosses. Whereas Super Mario Odyssey has some of the coolest level design I've ever seen. And the sheer amount of content in Super Mario Odyssey is so cool that it's like, yeah, none of this is really quality, but there's just so much of it that it's like, oh man, that's a lot of stuff. It makes both of these games really, really, really enjoyable, and I really highly recommend both of them. If you were to get only 2 games out of this list, then I'd probably say get Hat in Time and Odyssey. If you only wanted to get one, I'd probably say pick Hat in Time, because that one has better boss battles, and it has better characters. Yeah, there you go. There's my list. Okay, whatever, bye.